because there's been many moments where I'm like, you know what? I quit. I'm done. Right? And 2 days later, welcome back to the channel. It's your resident internet psychic medium and spiritual advisor. I'm currently in the spirit of realizing things. We're having a bit of a Kylie Jenner moment at the moment. Some enlightening is happening, and I had wanted to share it because I figured, maybe it could help. And if it doesn't help, then, maybe it gives insight into like other people's lives. So recently I've been talking about how I have been having one hell of a time, right? And I'm not going to say that I've been struggling because I refuse to be the victim of my own story, but I would say that I have definitely been experiencing some challenges, right? And the challenges are coming with like the clearing out. I've been talking about how just recently in my life, there are people, places, and things that have left, right? And I have good days and I have bad days. There are days where I'm like, okay, whatever, like it needed to happen, they needed to go, like whatever. But then I have other days because I'm like not a heartless monster where it kind of makes me sad because I'm like, oh, I actually really loved those people, right? But with that clearing, it hasn't been like a silent clearing. It's been drama and it's been people are mad at me. So for example, really how people have been exiting is they get mad at me and then they leave, right? It's not really like a calm, oh, we're just like not in alignment anymore. It's really like this blowout from their side and then an exit. And then what I mean from their side is recently I have been actually dealing with a lot of people throwing false allegations at me. You did this, you did that, you said this, you said that. And people have been accusing me of things that are not true, accusing me of saying things that are not true, doing things that are not true, being somebody that I'm not, people questioning my character, questioning my integrity. And this is actually the first time that that's actually ever happened in my life. And so I'm learning how to process that. Like, that's not a reoccurring theme for me. Like, in my life, just in general, I have always been known as someone that was quite dignified, someone that you can easily trust, someone that you can count on. I've always been known as the person that has been stable, reliable. If you need something, you go to her. If you have a problem, you go to her. If you have a secret, you can tell her. I've always been that person in my life. So to now enter a season where people are questioning who I am as an individual and what I'm doing, what I'm saying, is new for me because I'm not built like that, right? Like I'm not someone that you need to do that with. And I've always had people vouch for my character. Like my character has never been something that I had to fight for. My character has never been something that I had to defend. It's never been something that I had to like stand up for. In fact, it's always been other people going, oh, her, you can totally, like, she's like, yeah, she's good. Like, I recommend her. It's always been that dynamic. And so to have entered a season where people are questioning who I am, my integrity, my character has been rough because it's been really confusing because it's been like, where are you even coming up with this information from? And it's affected nearly every part of my life, right? Like even with my family, I'm more or less estranged from my family right now, due to false allegations that were put and projected onto me that were not true. And so they're actually not talking to me right now. And so that's been rough, like going through the holidays and not having them, not hearing from them, getting married and them not being around and them not being there and not receiving any support. Even like getting engaged. When I got engaged, that was actually when my family backed out of my life. And I was like, I don't understand what happened and why that's the case. You would think that like, that's a beautiful, happy time for you in your life. And like, they were just like nowhere to be found, right? And so what that situation did was sort of like reaffirmed, like, oh no, like we're really in this on our own. And like, thank God for my husband now, but it reaffirmed prior to him why I had spent 11 years of my life just going around this world by myself, like going into adulthood with no support system. It just kind of reaffirmed it. And anyway, the allegations had gotten so bad that I can't even talk about like what's happened to me or what people have been alleging that I've been doing, because one of the situations, because there's been many situations, right? It's been many situations of people having these allegations that aren't true. And then one of the allegations, there's an NDA in place. So I'm not actually allowed to go into specific details about what happened to me. Even though none of it was true. And I reached a part, because when the journey first started happening, like when all of this started sort of to kick off, I wasn't really talking about it much. One, I think I was like embarrassed. I was confused because I had never actually experienced it before. But two, I didn't really know why. And so if someone were to ask me, well, why do you think that happened? I wouldn't have been able to answer the question, because the answer, I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where any of it was coming from. I felt like it was coming out of left field. But then when I started opening up and telling people what was wrong with me, because fortunately, you know, I may not have an abundance of family, but I do have some really beautiful friendships that are in my life, and people that are in my life in that kind of way, chosen family that I'm so grateful for. And y'all are just gonna have to forgive this wig. This is the first time I looked at myself. This was a throw-on moment prior to hitting record. There was no thought that went into this hat that's currently on my head. Is it straight? Whatever. But the friends that I have been so unbelievably supportive. And when I started to open up about like these allegations and things that are being thrown at me, my friends started to get angry on my behalf. Now, during the period of allegations, I found that I wasn't necessarily all that angry. It was more so of like confusion and sadness. But my friends have been angry. Why are people saying these things about you? You would never do that. These people don't know who you are. Why would they ever say that you would be this way or do this way or do this thing or whatever? Like, you would never, like, we know you. You would never do that. You would never say that. How dare this person do that to you? I've had friends say, if they did to me, if they threw that allegation at me, the way they threw at you, oh, it's going to be a big deal. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I need representation. I need, blah, blah, like people are saying, like, why are you not essentially screaming it from the rooftops and yelling and fighting back, right? And one of the reasons was because I was still in the state of shock. I didn't know what was going on or why it was happening. And so I couldn't respond to it because I didn't know why it was happening in the first place. I didn't know really like what to respond to. But all of these people that were friends who had a moment where they chose me because they chose a side. And they said, no, she would never do those things that you're saying that she did. She would never say those things that you're saying that she did. At one point in time, my husband, who was then my fiance, I'll never forget the look in his eye when he looked at me because he could see the sadness. And he was like, you're such a beautiful person. Why would someone say these things about you? You're such a beautiful person. Why would your family do this to you or say these things about you? Why would people try to hurt such a beautiful person? And I always just the whole time was just in shock. I couldn't really say much of anything because I was confused as to what was going on entirely. But then last night I was thinking to myself, because it's been like ups and downs, right? But I was thinking to myself last night, like, why are all of these happening? What is happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And then what clicked was all of this started happening at the time of recording about 6 months ago. 6 months ago was one, probably when you guys saw me be a lot more present. But 6 months ago was also when I made a hard and firm decision that I was, in fact, pursuing my spiritual purpose. That anything else I did in life, that was great, that was fine. but that I needed to remember that I had a spiritual purpose and not to allow anything to get in the way of that spiritual purpose. 6 months ago was also when I would read my tarot cards and all of a sudden I started getting tower. That was when everything started to clear out. That was when all of these allegations and accusations started and things were being thrown at me. And I was like, what is this? And one of the conversations that I had, because there's been many of just conversations of people just throwing things at me, right? But one of them that was probably one of the most significant ones that stuck out to me was in that conversation, in the midst of this person slinging false allegations. I said to them, and I remember being so calm, I said, I don't actually know why I'm being crucified. That was what I said. It provoked a bit of a response from that person because they were like, well, I would never do that. I would crucify somebody. And I was like, no, like you're crucifying me right now. And I remember being so calm when I said it. Like it wasn't a yelling. There was no back and forth exchange. That person that was slinging the allegations was super passionate. And I remember the whole time being calm. And I remember going, okay, like, I understand that like you're upset, but I didn't do or say any of those things that you're alleging. It didn't happen. But I also understand that your mind is made up, that you have formulated a decision about who you think I am as an individual. I can see by the circumstance that there isn't anything that I can say or do that would change the judgment that you've already made. So, okay, like, thank you for your opinion, I guess, right? But there was like a calmness that was there. And then I was like, and then you're also crucifying me. And I don't really understand like why that's the case, but like whatever. But last night when I was thinking about it and I was like, the theme of like crucifixion, not that, because I'm not a church girl, never was, not a Bible thumper, never was, right? Don't think that I'm anywhere close or near being Jesus, but there's a theme that spiritual teachers go through prior to them really getting into their groove of where they're supposed to be. It's like that final test. And I remember when it all clicked up where I was like, you felt that you were being crucified because you had gone through a 6-month period of just people throwing tomato after tomato after tomato after tomato. And at no point in time did you raise your voice at any of them. Every tomato that hit you in the head, you said, thank you for being in my life when you chose to be in my life, and I now set you free. And you let every tomato hit you. And then you have these people who love you, who are pissed because you're getting smacked in the face by tomatoes, and they know that you shouldn't be hit by any tomatoes, and you're not doing anything about it, or at least that is how they're perceiving it. But every single time something happened, and people would ask me why, I would always say, I'm not sure like why this happened, but I do understand, right? And even like after the crucifixion situation, someone said to me, but I would be so mad. Like, why aren't you mad? And I said, because I understand. And he said, well, what do you mean? Like, what is there to understand? And what I understood in that moment was all these people that I had dealt with for various reasons. What I was experiencing was the projection of themselves onto me. Some of the times that people were slinging allegations, it was because of their lack of love for themselves projected onto me, right? Some allegations, it was due to their fear or their paranoia that was then projected onto me. Something about me and my presence or how I moved or what I said or the sound of my voice or the tone or whatever, because I still don't specifically know what triggered each of these situations, right? Triggered that person to enough to where then there was nothing but projection onto me. I'm talking, I have been in situations where I have been hounded for many minutes, for well over hours, where people just won't stop. They're just going, and I'm just very politely going, I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're upset. You're this, you're that, you think you're this, you think you're that, and I'm over here pursuing spiritual purpose, helping people get off the ground, helping people stand up, helping people pursue the life that they actually want to live. And I've got this entire group over here that's like fuck you, bitch, die. And the contrast was so severe that there was a moment where I didn't know what to do. There was a moment where I was like, am I really this terrible of a person? There was a moment where I was like, if I'm that awful, should I even be here in any way? Like, am I taking up space? Am I in the way? Right? Am I a waste of time? Right? Because it was too much of a contrast. It was too much of like, I really hate you and I love you so much. Thank you. And I didn't know, my brain didn't know where to put things and where to categorize. I didn't know who I was. And so I had this little period of time where I was like, who the fuck am I? I know what I'm here to do, but maybe I'm not making a difference. And then I was like, oh no, bitch. Spiritual teachers have to go through that. That is one of the tests. It's a major test. The crucifixion test, right? To test whether or not you are going to be who you say you're going to be. Because in the midst of all the tomato throwing, it is very easy to step into your animal nature and then just go ham, right? To just be like a bat out of hell. It is really easy to switch up and go, okay, that thing that you think that I am, even though I'm not, you're not changing your mind, so I might as well be it anyway, because screw you, right? It's really easy to do that. And the entire time I just said, okay, I understand. I love you, but I understand that you don't want to be here anymore. And or I love you, but I understand that you don't want me to be around you anymore. Because it went both ways. There was people that just didn't want to be around me, and there were people that were like, no, you need to get away from me. And I had to go, okay, I will leave, right? Like, I don't want to be in your presence. And it's affecting you so negatively that this is how you're feeling towards me, that it's creating a situation where you're seething. Okay, I'll go, right? And I did that through all of the situations, so much so that even one of the people who was part of that long list of allegations messaged me a couple of days later and said, you had so much grace. And in my mind, I thought, but you still think the same thing about me, don't you? And so it's been a really like interesting moment where I had to go, oh, girl, like this was like a test to see if you were actually going to remain in purpose, like how you said you wanted to. Were you still going to be of service? Because in those situations, it's really easy not to be. It's really easy to go, screw all of this. Nobody appreciates me anyway, so I'm not going to do it. Maybe, like I said before, maybe I'm not really having an impact, so I'm going to stop. And because there's been many moments where I'm like, you know what? I quit. I'm done. Right? And 2 days later, welcome back to the channel. It's your resident internet psychic medium and spiritual advisor, right? But I'm like, I quit, right? But every week I'm still going into it, and every week I'm still doing it. And it's not just YouTube, right? Like I'm in person, like Mystic Rain is like the name or whatever. But like I do this work in life. Like this is like what I do this, right? Even when I have like traditional muggle jobs, I have always been in the traditional muggle jobs, some form of spiritual advisor. How I've always given information has always been in some kind of advisory spiritual capacity. It's always been a little bit different, which has always been why people have listened to it. But these 6 months, man, have been many times of me going, I quit. I don't think I'm making a change. I don't think I'm having an impact. I think I'm pissing people off more than I am assisting anybody. I'm done. But then it just occurred to me last night. I was just laying in bed. It was like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I realized all of those situations had nothing to do with you. Your family, nothing to do with you. Every allegation that's ever flown your way, absolutely nothing to do with you. Even that NDA you had to sign, nothing to do with you. It is everybody else and where they are on their journey. It is the projection that they have of themselves onto you. their feelings of lack of love, their feelings of fear, their feelings of paranoia, their anger that they've never sorted out, that childhood trauma or those wounds that they never addressed, it's now projected onto you because you were an easy target. Why? Because you gave them grace. If you were someone who popped off every second, they wouldn't have projected it onto you because they wouldn't have wanted the aggravation of then dealing with your response and then dealing with your reaction. They projected it onto you because they knew that there wouldn't be a response or reaction. They knew that you would have been someone that would have extended grace, that you would have been someone that would have extended patience. That is why the people who are still in your life that love you, the friends that were looking out for you, were so angry on your behalf. Why all of them were like, but she would never do that. Why are you doing that to her out of all people? Because they know this about you. All of those allegations was us, spirit, universe, whoever, making sure that you're ready in the way that you say that you're ready. Through the test of crucifixion. Now, I do need to figure out a different word to use because I don't want it to be misconstrued that this is any form of comparison against Jesus, because it's not. I just don't have the vocabulary. I don't know what word to use that's like not crucifixion, but I do know that we've all had moments and times in life where we feel like everyone's coming at us and we don't know why. We didn't do anything. What are you talking about? I said this thing or I did this thing. I didn't do this thing. And then feeling like I don't even know how to defend my honor. But I just, through the entire period, even though I had these waverings and I was going back and forth, I always knew that like it wasn't an honor that needed to be defended. I didn't have to protect or defend my honor because I just simply knew it wasn't true. And there was always this feeling of like the truth always comes to the light. That's just kind of how it works, right? I didn't feel like I had to get back at anybody or that I needed revenge because the universe balances itself. Balance is a natural state of order. It's one of the universal laws. Things will rebalance itself. I didn't need justice because when you are moving as truth, in your truth, you are walking justice. I don't need to bring it to you because it is walking justice. That's what truth is. Justice. When you go to, you know what I mean? Like, it's the truth. You go to court, what are you trying to get? The truth. You're trying to get the justice. So if you're living in this truth and you're walking in your truth and you're knowing that you're being truthful, there's no reason for me to go get justice because I am the justice. Just like you are the justice. And so I never felt a need to do anything. And what I'm realizing is by me not doing anything, perhaps I did everything, which was understand that the whole thing to begin with was a spiritual lesson. It was never about me to begin with. It was me needing to learn how to put my ego to the side at times when it's the most necessary. And to understand that when you're working with humans, which is what you said you want to do by pursuing your spiritual path, that these things happen. And when they happen, what are you willing to do in return? What are you going to do in return? Is it going to provoke you out of what you know is true? Is it going to push you back into your ego, push you back into your animal side when your higher self is the one that's talking? Or are you going to continue listening to your higher self? The whole time I knew that a reaction wasn't required. It didn't mean that my feelings weren't hurt, but I knew that a reaction just wasn't required. I knew the whole time that it just wasn't necessary. I didn't understand why it was all occurring because it was the first time that it was. But I now understand that it was simply a lesson. Because what I feel now in my life, I no longer feel like this feeling of clearing, like clearing out. I feel, actually, I don't want to use the word empty. I feel like the word empty is just so, it's not that it's empty, but it feels spacey. Like energetically, my life feels real spacey. There's just a lot of room for stuff to go. And I've always said that when you're trying to manifest and bring new things into your life, that you have to get rid of old things because you have to create the space for that new energetic manifestation to go. And I feel very spacey now. And that's a beautiful thing. It's confusing and it's beautiful. It's confusing because not quite sure what's going to fill the space, but it's beautiful because there's all of this room now. There's all of this possibility, all of this potential, all of this space for new things to go. And I find that really exciting. What I'll do, because I'm trying to keep up with you guys' questions, bear with me now. Your girl's going through it. Your girl just got married. Some of you are waiting on a return email. It's in the works. I'm just trying to catch up. It was the holidays. But someone had a question that I thought was actually really good. And I was like, oh, I want to answer this on YouTube. And the reason why I wanted to answer this on YouTube is because, one, I think a lot of people go through this. And I do think that it's not something that's really discussed openly in the way that it probably should be. And so I figured let's talk about it. So the question is, I believe it's from @DingStrini. First off, did I hear you say husband? We knew about the engagement, but I missed the I do's. Congratulations. Thank you, dear. Secondly, when all these changes were upon you or suggested, were you worried that he would be part of the cleaning house? I asked because I'm also married and worried about that when big changes are upon me. So meaning, when people were being cleared out of my life, was I concerned that one of those things would be my husband? I would say not at this go. There was a go, maybe about a year and a half ago, where I had a cleaning, a clearing out. It wasn't like this though. Like in retrospect, it was like mini. It was small. It wasn't nearly what this was. Where I did have a concern that maybe he'd be a part of the clearing out. It wasn't because he was doing anything or that I felt like there was no compatibility. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with like dating in this day and age is like really difficult. And to like get to each milestone seems like it takes so much work. And like to get out of a situationship, to get a title, that takes a lot of work. Then to go from having a title to then maybe moving in together takes a lot of work. And then moving in together and then maybe getting engaged and getting arranged takes a lot of work. And so to get to each milestone in like modern dating is so difficult. There's this fear of like spooking the partner and then them running away. And so that was a little bit of it, like not knowing whether or not it was like too good to be true and then I was going to do something that ended up spooking him or something. What I realize now when it comes to that was my projection onto him of the insecurities I have about self. So, oh my God, will he still love me if I do this? Will he still like me if I do this? All because I had had previous dating experiences where like I would do something which in retrospect now was benign. It meant nothing. But then the guy would use that as an excuse to like back out of the situation. And I internalized all of those situations and took it as being something wrong with me versus like, no, like you're just an idiot, right? So that was part of it. But there was like another part of it too, like not knowing whether or not we would make it to the end. And like what I mean by that is, so I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. We are like an international couple. It's an international marriage. And I'm talking about it because it's a situation that people don't know how it works. One, globalization. People are starting to now meet people from different places, different countries. The internet, you're meeting people that are not necessarily from the country that you're from. And so not necessarily always understanding the process of like how it works if you're trying to like marry someone that has a different citizenship. But I have always had international relationships because I have always lived in different countries. And so the idea of like getting into an international marriage for me was like the most probable, right? Like even when I lived in the UK, everyone that I dated in the UK, like I'm American. So it wouldn't have mattered if I ended up with someone that I was dating when I was in the UK, it would have still been international. So the idea of being in an international marriage was very normal to me. But I recognize now, talking to other people, like, oh, my husband this, my husband that is not necessarily always normal to other people, right? And so, but part of that process is like an immigration process. You have to go through a visa process. And for those of you that know nothing about it, it is one of the most awful immigration things that you can ever do. Now, I have dealt with immigration a lot. I have had my own immigration because I lived in other countries. So I dealt with immigration on my own personal behalf, fussing with different governments to get access to a visa, going to different embassies in different countries because I've had my documents stolen and I need emergency passports. So like, I'm very like aware of like the process. But when you are marrying a foreigner, it's awful. I don't care if you are American and you're doing it here. When I was in the UK, I had a lot of girlfriends that were American who married like a British citizen. And the process, you first of all, you got to prove that it's a real relationship. You got to prove that you're in love. The government wants to see your text messages. Your government wants to see your bank accounts and your bank statements so they know what finances you're working with. And at any point in time, right, they know all of your employment history, like they know your health history, right? You got to turn over your health documents to the government. They know what diseases you do and do not have. When I tell you, it's such an invasive process. It's also a very long process. Our process, just to get to the point where we had permission to be married, because in the US, you have to have permission. That a lot of you didn't know that, right? So if you're not already married, meaning maybe like you met in a different country, you got married, you lived your life, and then you're coming back to the US, if you are in a position where you just want to get married, you gotta ask for permission to do that. You have to like petition to the government and say, hey, like you see this person, like, am I allowed to marry them? Like you have to do that. And then you got to prove that you're like real in a relationship. You got to prove that you're engaged. When did you get engaged? You need all types of photos. You need timestamps. They need to verify that like it happened on the day that you said that it happened. So you can be in a relationship for like 3 years and you need to verify that that thing 3 years ago happened. You need a timestamp. Like it's like an awful process. And then after the process is done, the government is the one that reserves the right to decide yes or no. So you're going through the process never really knowing whether or not you're going to end up together because you don't know what the government is going to decide. And so going into the process, like knowing that was the case, yeah, I had a lot of fears that like he may be part of the clearing out, not because there was a lack of love or affection, but because it wasn't in my control. It wasn't in my hands, and it wasn't in his control either. It wasn't in his hands. You get to a place where like what country you're going to live in and settle in, it's no longer in your control. It's whether or not the government says yes or no. And the government will go, well, you know, as long as you meet all of the eligibility requirements, but the eligibility requirements, like you need a lawyer. Like a lot of these immigration situations that concern like families, marriage require lawyers. Thankfully, I spent a hell of a lot of money at law school, so we didn't need one. I was able to do everything on my own. But like most people need them, right? Like I don't think I would actually recommend that you do it on your own. It's actually really horrific. And so I didn't know if he was going to be part of the clearing. And so our entire relationship, I think both of us, we kind of gone off of the, if it's meant to be, it'll be, because there were so many barriers to entry that we just kind of like fell into like faith. Like if we're supposed to be together, those barriers to entry will fall along the way. And they did, fortunately. But it wasn't easy. And if I would have held on, like, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I think both of us would have been in a really mentally, like in a really bad place. And so there was always like this fear or this understanding that it could get cleared out, due to it not being under my control, due to it not being under his control, and then us moving on faith. And a lot of couples that are in that kind of situation, that are in like international relationships, when they're in that period of time, you are moving on faith. We went 1.5 years without seeing each other because of the process, right? So people say, oh, why don't you just get married? Oh, it's so easy to do this. No, like when you're doing it the right way and you're actually going through things legally, right? It's actually really horrendous and it's a very strenuous process. And there are families right now with children where the mother and the father are split up and the kids can't see their parents. And there is no urgency on behalf of any of these governments and any of these countries to make sure these families are reunited. It doesn't matter how long you're together, whether or not you're married. It doesn't matter whether or not the woman is actively pregnant. There is no push or urgency to reunite these couples. And so because of that, yeah, I was 100% concerned that it would be part of the clearing, that he would get cleared out. But I would say at the same time, even though there was concern, there wasn't anxiety about it. And that was because I have always, I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm someone that believes everything happens for a reason. And I just kind of had this understanding that if there was a clearing out of him, then that would mean that he served his purpose in my life. I served my purpose in his life, and that it was just time to part ways. And that was like, and that there was a spiritual reason behind that. But definitely like super, super nervous about whether or not that would be the case. um, which, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people that would probably experience something like that would also, it maybe have a little bit concerns of like, oh snap, like what if the government says no? Like what do we do? Type of energy. So I also had another question. I wonder if you could cover trolls and people being rude and disrespectful online. I'm not sure if it's different, but they are always strangers. And this comment was left on the video called "Dealing with Mean People" as an empath, and it was left by Ethan Lazzarini. I think, well, one, people that are being rude and disrespectful online, we have to remember the majority of the world are not prioritized or focused on healing or shadow work or whatever, right? They're just gonna go and they're gonna say what they want to say and they're gonna do what they want to do, and there's not a whole lot that you can do with it. However, I will say this: if you are someone that's on social media that is trying to grow your platform or just grow the account in general, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have people be rude and disrespectful online, because one, the majority of those people are bots anyway, they're not actually real. And two, it doesn't matter if the comment is positive or negative. If they're leaving it, then it's engagement and the algorithm likes it. And so, meaning that the algorithm then will push out the content a lot more. And so if someone is actually saying rude and mean things to you, and then there is activity with it, it's actually helpful, right? There has been a few times when someone has said something mean to me and I've like clapped back. And you guys are so sweet because you guys are like, oh my God, Rain, don't do that. Don't listen to them. They're terrible. Rain's great. Like, no, leave her alone. Like, Rain, you don't got to respond, right? And I'm like, girl, now move. I'm working on my engagement. Because if I respond and then they respond again and then I respond again, it's like a little help in the algorithm. It like pushes it out further, right? So, there is use for it. Also, too, depending on how far out it gets pushed in the algorithm, also makes you money. So, whatever. I also feel like, too, mean people on the internet, it's like mean people in person. I think at least on the internet, you find out who they are faster than you would find out in person. Because there's a thing with the internet where people think that they're anonymous and that you can't find them. And so they just say what they're really thinking. And I would actually rather know immediately that that's like who you are versus having to wait to find out later in person that you're actually like that. There's also an element of people wanting to be relevant. And so maybe they use whatever platform you have in order to do that, as opposed to then trying to build their own. That is an aspect of it too. But then also too, like, I think the internet is also a really triggering place. And people are consuming it all day from the moment they wake up. And so people could have, for example, at this point in time, could have been going video after video after video, and you see everything that's happening in Gaza. They get to your video, you say one thing, and it's triggering for them, and you just happen to be the thing that got the hit, for example, right? So what ends up happening is that they then start projecting whatever they're thinking on to you, right? Like, you can watch a video and the person's whole content is about, I want to be healthy again, right? Because maybe I had an eating disorder. And so they're posting their meals. And then you got people commenting on, well, you're overeating. Like, what? Like, this person literally is recovering from an eating disorder. You're telling them that they're overeating. But did your mother take your plate away when you were a child, right? Like, and so you're projecting what you perceive to be overeating onto somebody else because your definition may not be the same as their definition. It's all projection. Like all of social media is projection. It's projecting, people are projecting what they think and feel about themselves onto you. Creators, including myself, are projecting onto the internet about what you would like to be seen as. And that's something that you can't help, right? Like you can sit here and be like, I'm authentic. And yeah, you probably are like an authentic creator. But I'd be lying if I say that there isn't an element of, oh my God, like I just said that one thing, how am I going to be perceived? And then so you are like mindful about what image you're projecting, what message you're projecting. The entire internet is projection. And so if people are leaving like rude and mean comments on your stuff, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them, what they think about themselves, what's happening internally, what's happening in their external world, and them then projecting onto you. And if it's not them projecting onto you, then it's a bot, okay? So that's what I would say about that. But even with that being said, if there's ever a point in time where you feel like it gets to you, like that's okay too, because you're human. And if we're going to be real and call a spade a shovel, they're bullying, right? Who wants to be bullied? Who wants to post something and you're excited about what you posted or you're excited about what the message was, and then someone leaves a mean comment and it brings your entire energy down, right? Like you're also a human. And so don't hold an expectation that you're like immune to it. It does get easier. Remember that you can always block them. You can always delete it. You can be your own moderator or you can clap back. And if you clap back, chances are, best case scenario, you get a little bit of engagement. You make some money off of them and then everyone goes to sleep, I want to answer one more. I struggle with this a lot. I've been trying to start a tarot business and setting my rates has been so challenging. I haven't been reading for ages, but I know my readings are great and I provide a lot of value. I have the testimonies to prove it. But somehow I can't seem to price myself higher than €35 for a reading without feeling guilty. I know I'm worth a lot more than that, but how am I going to show potential customers that I am? I also offer a tarot reading workshop that's really good and selling for €19 now, and you got me doubting whether I need to up that price. Steph got money blocks, but don't know how to overcome them. So one, tarot with Ruby, that €35, I'm gonna need you to get that up. I need you to go. This may give you hives, but I need you to set a price that has 3 numbers in it without a decimal. Okay? I need it to be in the 100 somewhere. If you want to start at 100 and then work your way up from there, that's one thing. But I need you to go up because $35 is significantly below the market price, okay? While you're working through your money blocks, start with pricing at the market price because at least it's real, right? It's not something that you made up in your head. That's what people are paying. So price what people are paying and then work out your money blocks later, right? I need you to have a price that has 3 numbers in it. €35 is way too low, okay? That's number 1. Number 2, it says that how am I going to show potential customers that I am worth it? Why do you feel like it's something that needs to be shown? You don't have to show people how much you're worth. People see it naturally on their own, right? It's like when okay, I'm going to give you like a really simple example. Think about all of the name brand companies, right? Like your Louis Vuitton, your Gucci, your Christian Louboutin, your Hermes, your Versace's. How often do you see commercials for these brands? But then how often would you see an advert for Tommy Hilfiger or Michael Kors? Not that there's anything wrong with having an advert. It's just that these brands don't advertise, or at least that they don't advertise in the same kind of way. Right? Because you don't need to. Customers just look at it and then it's an automatic judgment and then the value is assigned. No one studies how much they value something. It's a snap judgment that's created, that's made by people, right? And so going through the process of trying to show somebody how valuable you are is a futile process because you'll put more effort into trying to create the presentation then that person is going to put into actually making the decision. The value is decided automatically, right? Everyone that's watching this video, you've already assigned a value. there's nothing I can really do about that, right? You've already assigned a value to whatever it is that you think I'm doing, saying, how much the prices are, like whatever. You already have an opinion about it, which is okay, by the way. Like, I'm not saying that like, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their opinions, and everyone's entitled to believing and thinking what they want to believe and what they think. And everyone is also entitled to assigning a value to something, right? Let's say you charge $100. Someone's going to say, I don't think that that's worth it. And you're going to internalize that and go, well, maybe they're saying that for me. I'm not worth $100. What they may be saying is actually, I was just laid off. I got 3 kids. It was just the holidays. I spent all my money on presents and gifts. So I'm really tight right now with money. And so right now, $100 is too much for me to spend. And so right now, I don't think the value was worth that for me, because I've got other priorities like putting food in my children's mouths. What we have a tendency to do is to internalize why someone made that decision. And then we go, oh, it must be because I'm not worth this amount of money. Not realizing that, well, the world doesn't really revolve around us, and other people have other priorities. It doesn't mean that they don't like you. It doesn't mean that they won't pay it one day. It doesn't mean that they also think that you're too expensive. They may not think anything about the price that you chose. They may think that it's too expensive for them in that moment. Why? Because they got 3 kids, right? But what we have to realize, and it's difficult, especially when you're doing any form of spiritual work, because a lot of people get into it due to this desire to genuinely want to help, right? And so when we feel like we're setting the prices too high, we internalize that as pricing people out. And that has a tendency to be in conflict with our natural and genuine desire to want to help people. We think that we're causing them a disservice or actually being really unhelpful. And all of that information ends up being something that's internalized when really it doesn't actually have a whole lot to do with us, right? It's just that person has life happening to them. We also have to remember that like that person has their own journey. That's not our journey, right? And we have a tendency to interject and be a little bit nosy and put ourselves into that journey. And then we start worrying about other people's bank accounts, right? Like, well, what if they can't afford it? Well, why are we in their bank account? Y'all, like no one knows how much money you have. You don't know how much money I have. You may be looking at somebody because they wear basic clothing thinking that they have no money, yet they're like an heir. They wear basic clothing because like they just don't care about it. Not because they don't have the money to afford it. They're like an heir. They're waiting for their grandfather to pass away so they can collect a nice fat check. You don't know everybody's situation. And so we have to stay out of it, right? We have to stay out of what we perceive they can do, stay out of what we perceive that they're going to think or why they're going to think what they're going to think. We have to stay out of it. Because what ends up happening is that we'll take our money block and then we project it onto somebody else and we assume that that person has the same money block that we have, right? So we could have a block of saying, well, I wouldn't pay $100, and $100 is just a random number I'm using. I personally think it needs to be a lot higher than that, but like in the event of not wanting you to break out in hives, we're going to start there. We could say, due to our money block, I don't think I'd pay $100 to go see that particular reader, but really, we're worried because maybe things haven't been so great at work. Maybe they cut our hours and we don't have as many shifts. We're worried about our own stuff, right? And so it's creating all of these money blocks. Maybe we grew up in a household that had no money and we grew up poor. Maybe we saw our grandparents struggling to make ends meet. And we take our experiences and our journey and then we say that person has the same experience and the same journey, and therefore that person must feel the same way about money as I feel about money. And then we make it their block. And then we assume that that person is not going to pay for it. And in the event that they don't pay for it, we then internalize their reasoning for being because of us, not realizing that like maybe they just don't want to that day, or maybe they just got other things going on. You know what I mean? Like, for example, I can see someone, because I see readers. I got friends that are readers, and when we pay each other for our services, and they can be like, hey, you want to come in? And I may, in my mind, go, oh, I actually saw a purse I really want to buy. I'm going to go buy the purse instead. And if that person internalized that as there's something wrong with me, or Mr. Green thinks that there's something wrong with me, or I'm not worth the money, when all I wanted was to go buy a purse. You understand what I'm saying? So try not to project the money blocks onto other people. And when you're working through your money blocks, just price at the market rate, because the market rate means something. It's not made up. You didn't create a new number. It's not a situation where like you're overpricing. It's just what the market is willing to pay. So start there, and then at least you're making it the market rate while you're sorting through whatever it is that you're actually going through with money blocks, right? And again, like and don't judge yourself for having the money blocks. A lot of people have, not everybody, right? But a lot of people do, right? And a lot of times a lot of the times it's not our block. It is the block of a parent or a caregiver, but we have to remember that that person was born in a completely different era with completely different sets of laws and circumstances, right? We have to stop looking at the story that our mother had of struggling to raise us, right? Because was your mother born at a time before women could have bank accounts? We have to stop looking at how our grandmother had to depend so heavily on our grandfather. Like, your grandmother couldn't own legally, she couldn't own property. Like, they were living in different times. The legal setup, the societal setup is not the same thing anymore. If people are willing to pay $1,500 for a brand new iPhone, when honestly, there's only one new feature, and they're willing to do this every cycle, you can charge more than €35. Okay? It's not about showing or proving how much you're worth to people. It's about knowing that you are the value, and then leaving that thought form alone. Once you know that you're the value, that's where it stops. The thought form ends. That's a period. It's a hard stop. There is no, okay, but then how do I then show it? Because people have already made a decision. They've already passed a judgment on what they think about it. And it just kind of is what it is, right? But it doesn't matter that they've made the judgment. Like, they're entitled to do that, right? They also have their own journey and their own brain. Like, they're more than entitled to make that decision. It only matters about how you feel about yourself. And then that's when you just stop thinking. So much about pricing can be overthinking too. So just leave it there. Okay. Anyway, I have rambled enough. So I'm gonna go. We're gonna do that.